Thank you, Andrew. So what we're doing here is we're distinguishing between a drinker that probably is either a moderate or heavy drinker that just happens to be, quote, the life of the party, kind of one of those that everybody kind of chuckles at, smiles at. Probably one of those drinkers that are perpetually in a good mood and that type of thing, but then ties one on, gets a little too much to drink, and is probably a little bit haggard and the next day, but still nonetheless is somebody that can, quote, to large extent control their drinking and that type of thing. What this vice president wasn't really looking at, and we've been looking more into, is the actual alcoholic, the real alcoholic, the one that can't control their drinking at any given time, that has no power over that first drink, and then once they've started drinking, obviously they can't stop. So we're obviously, because we're in this chapter and we're reading about this and looking at it, we have that that ability to distinguish that, and obviously we've all been there. So that's what we're going to be looking at as we kind of go along. But this is kind of where we are. And I think it's important too. And I'll admit, I was in a meeting the other night, and there was a discussion after the fact that there were people that are joining AA that are not really alcoholics. And apparently there is a trend. I haven't seen it yet on most of the places I've been. This was just a gentleman that was just making an observation and comment, but that there are people that are joining AA that are not alcoholics, that somehow this is now kind of a fad or a neat thing to be a part of. And there is some discussion about how to handle people like that. Now, the response was that as long as the meeting is an open meeting, anybody can join and be a part of AA. But in this case, as long as it's an open meeting, there was no issue and shouldn't be an issue that anybody and everybody is welcome to be a part of the meeting, alcoholic or not. Certainly we prefer, and these are obviously geared towards alcoholics, but that was something that just came up. So there has been at least some observation of people that have been joining AA or being a part of AA that are not really alcoholic, which again, like I said, I haven't really seen, but there apparently is some meetings where that's happening. All right, enough of me. I'm sorry, Bill, we're going to go ahead and start with the next paragraph.
Okay. It is not to be expected that an alcoholic employee will receive a disproportionate amount of time and attention. He should not be made a favorite. The right kind of man, the kind who recovers, will not want this sort of thing. He will not impose. Far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is building some loyalty here with regard to an individual that is an alcoholic, that has been given an opportunity to recover and has taken that opportunity, made the commitment, and actually recovered from the hopeless state of mind and body that we all have experienced. With that comes a bit of loyalty. In any business, anytime you can build loyalty in your employees, that's a great thing. Now, the one thing that they are distinguishing here, and that is that you don't want to overdo it and actually give the impression that this person is being made a favorite. It is essentially that the alcoholic that's recovered and has this newfound product being productive and this newfound loyalty. You just want to keep that alive and encourage that to continue. But beyond that, you should leave the individual alone to be just treated just like you would any other productive employee. So that's part of that. And really, to take that one step further, the individual employer shouldn't single out alcoholics. And if they are recovering and doing what they're supposed to be doing, just reward them with the job and let them do their job. Don't overdo it. Don't announce things. I mean, there's the anonymity that we all want to keep as well. And certainly you don't want to single out anybody so that they get highlighted and resented by other employees. Now, that's a little different from a sponsor, because a sponsor is focused on the individual, is going to try to build that person up and continue to support them and encourage them to continue with their recovery. In that regard, you are in fact going to single that person out and try to do whatever's necessary to keep the recovery part of it alive and well and supported. Bill?
Today, I own a little company. There are 2 alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. But why not? They have a new attitude and they have been saved from a living debt. I have enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out.
All right, so we're at the end here, 2 employers, but this is really this is a good thing. It's a good part. This is the highlight that you're driving for, that you want the alcoholic to find themselves. When somebody has a new lease on life, there is an encouraging component to that allows them, or that gives them that motivation to do even more than they were before. And I think it's part of it is kind of making up for some lost time. Again, as I've just said, this is to be encouraged and supported. As an employer, you basically just let them go. I've always said that in business, I'd rather have somebody that I have to pull back on the reins to kind of slow them down, as opposed to the old dog on the porch that you can't get up to do much of anything. So if you are fortunate enough to be around these folks that are hard chargers, as I call them, and they get a lot of momentum there and really do a lot of great stuff, all the better. I think it's worth, a good pat on the back every once in a while and a thank you. And I think that that's all that most alcoholics that are recovering need. Couple of things, I guess, just to kind of finish out. Again, 2 employers is really a dual-hatted chapter, much like to the families afterward and to wives. And that is basically, it works for both those folks that are noted, and it also works for the sponsor. So just kind of put that there, and that's where we kind of are going to finish up with 2 employers. Now, we're going to move, Bill, is there anything that you want to add to the end of that?
No, I just agree with what you said. The last 3 chapters, you can use them for sponsor instructions, as well as for employers or to the family afterwards, or to wives, because they didn't have any sponsor instructions in this book, but basically they're telling somebody how to deal with an alcoholic. That's really all I got.
All right. Thank you, Bill. All right, we're going to be starting chapter 11, A Vision for You, which is the last actual chapter that we read for the first portion of the book. And I kind of have labeled this at the top of this chapter as the chapter of hope. And beyond that, I have highlighted several parts of this first paragraph as well. We'll let Bill get started for it. So chapter 11, A Vision for You, we're on page 151. Bill?
Okay, a vision for you. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in the last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. there was always one more attempt, one more failure.
Yeah, and I think that this kind of gets us off onto the right foot. One, we want to distinguish ourselves between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And like it says in the very beginning here, for drinking, for most normal folks, it's conviviality, companionship, and a colorful imagination. Just a lot of fun. I think you could call it on the light side, a little bit of social lubricant, but at the same time, it's meant to be controlled. And nonetheless, you find that it is much different than what the recovering alcoholic experiences. And I can think back to moments where I know now, didn't then, but I know now when I started losing the control, if you will, and my drinking kind of changed gears from being a heavy drinker, and I was for several years. But the thing is that I could control it to the point that I could stop at a certain time because there was regulations and rules in place as an aviator in the Marine Corps that you couldn't drink past a certain point if you were going to be flying the next day. So it was 12 hours, what we called bottle to brief, meaning that you would finish 12 hours prior to your brief. And then that brief was 2 hours prior to taking flight. So there's really a 14-hour time frame between the time you stop drinking and the time that you would actually climb into an aircraft and fly. There was also a kind of a distinguishing piece there, and that was also that you were free from all effects. So you kind of had to manage yourself in those final couple of hours of the drinking period, if you will, to get to a point where you could ease up enough that, you know, you really gave yourself a good 16 hours, maybe 15 hours, something like that, between taking that last drink and before you were actually at the controls of an aircraft and flying. Now, I did that religiously, and I know that in of the 24 years I was in the Marine Corps, there were really only 3 instances, one for a crew chief and 2 for pilots, that ever really broke that rule that I know of. And I was around, obviously, all of us were, most everybody in the Marine Corps were drinkers. And of those that were drinking, a lot of them were heavy drinkers. So, but we did stick with it. Now, I can remember certain moments where things started slipping, and I found myself being a more resentful, moody, and less convivial drunk. And that is where I can sit here and say that I could never recapture the great moments of the past. I would find myself waking up in a place and not knowing how I got there. The blackouts, the kind of picking, we'll call them picking arguments, but in some cases I was ready to go fisticuffs if I had to at times. And I'm not a very big guy, so I was certainly setting myself up for some failures there. And it was very disheartening for that. So there is hope, and the fact is I have recovered, and things are a lot better, and I mean that sincerely. Since from the past, I'm still sometimes an asshole. I'm still sometimes who I am. That doesn't change. It just means that I don't have the alcohol element that's contributing to it and kind of turning up the volume and making it a louder situation, if you will, kind of figuratively. Bill, you got anything for that?
Oh yeah, the only thing I'll mention is it tells us that what alcohol does for us. It says it means release from care, boredom, and worry. In other words, when we drink, it makes us feel good. And then it says, but not in the last days of heavy drinking. So at some point, alcohol turned on us. All right, the next paragraph. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding companionship and approval. Momentarily, then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand.
Yeah, this is an incredibly colorful paragraph, and one that I would say that just shows Bill's capability when it comes to actually really describing something to a high degree. And it's right. These are things that you're going to want to watch out for as far as the newcomer is concerned. And these are some good questions that you can ask. Have you found yourself withdrawing from other people? I mean, my point being is that if you're still working, or if you're working with the newcomer and you're trying to qualify this person and somehow walk them towards them saying that they are in fact alcoholic, but not just saying it, but agreeing with it and internalizing it and understanding it. These are some things to kind of look for with regard to that. Shivering denizens, obviously the shaking, that type of thing. You guys have heard me say I was doing it on a daily basis, and I had misdiagnosed it as a tremor when it really was just my withdrawal from alcohol. And it is lonely. It's a very lonely place to be, and something that we all have been at and realize. And the other thing too is the four horsemen of AA, terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. I mean, obviously that's a key set of factors that all of us can sit back and say, it was fearful, and I didn't understand why I couldn't control my drinking as hard as I tried, and it frustrated me to no end, and all I did was just despair over the whole thing. But yet every day I was already, from the time I woke up, trying to figure out when I was going to be able to take that first drink, even though I knew that there was no happiness that was going to come with it at that point. So very, very colorful chapter, but paragraph here. Bill?
Okay, the only thing I'd like to add is notice he's got King Alcohol in capital letters. At one time, alcohol was Bill's higher power, and I think most of us can identify with that. All right, the next paragraph. Now and then, a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end.
Yeah, so this is a serious paragraph right here, and it is one that I know we've seen time and again as the individual that comes into the folds of AA. They get a little bit of sobriety, which is essentially the dry drunk type of deal, and all of a sudden now they think they've licked it to the extent that, holy cow, maybe I can in fact control my drinking. And with that, I am doing a lot better than I was before. And certainly there is a brighter part of that. Anytime you get, a good night's sleep, you wake up, feeling a lot better, even though for weeks you might have not been able to get very good sleep, and your fatigue is still going to take several more nights of good sleep in order to overcome that fatigue. The same thing is going to happen with this this dry drunk or recently sober person. They are in fact trying to convince themselves that they've got this licked. And as a matter of fact, and I know when I was there, I was thinking about, now that I've been able to get a week or two under my belt, that means I can probably control my drinking and I'm going to be able to jump back into it. And I would just kind of watch and listen up for cues that I would convince myself that others were convincing me that it was okay to drink again, when in fact all I was doing was making it up, knowing now that the people that were around me didn't want me to ever drink again, and being able to try and get those half dozen drinks. It's like I've always said, as soon as I took that first drink of the first drink I was taking, I was already thinking of my fourth drink, because I knew that I could easily drink 3 drinks in front of people with nobody thinking a thing about it. It was when I got to that fourth drink that I knew people would start looking at me funny, and then that was it. There was a time, and I think this is also important, that an individual can't imagine themselves either with a drink or without a drink. And I think it kind of starts out with thinking that you couldn't think of life without a drink. I know that the individual I'm sponsoring right now has had several comments about how young he is in comparison to me, and thinking to himself that at this point in time in his life, he can't imagine that he's now saying and understanding that he's an alcoholic, and how is he going to maneuver life without alcohol, because it's been such a big part of his life, even though now it's been destructive, and a lot of problems have occurred and the consequences have really grown. But it does have kind of this foreboding ending here, in that he will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. And that is certainly a point in time where a lot of us have found ourselves, not all of us, but most of us, I'm saying, have at least thought about this, being that I'm not going to be able to control this, and it certainly is going to be my demise. And we certainly are talking about somebody that might be thinking of hurting themselves or suicidal. It does happen. People find themselves at the point that they just cannot control their drinking. They've lost all of their friends. They've lost their job. They may have lost their home. They're sitting there looking around all alone, and there's nobody there to pick them up and help support them, and certainly try and take them through this program. And I can tell that there's probably been some really dark moments in people's lives. Unfortunately, some of them act on it, and it is the end. So, very serious thing that we're talking about. I know this chapter is basically a vision for you, and it is about hope. So what we're basically doing is kind of starting out with this is how bad it can get, and then it'll slowly build us up after that, which is a nice thing that they do in this chapter. Bill?
Okay, next paragraph. We have shown how we have got out from under. You say, yes, I am willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute?
Well, sure. And that's really the questions that you're going to get as a sponsor, especially for a newcomer that's really still trying to understand alcoholism, their place in it, and really this program. So sure, it seems like that you're going to lose alcohol, which has been, quote, your social lubricant, and kind of getting you into that jovial kind of fun place. But at the same time, if we've said it before, and I know Rob has said it before, and that is if we were boring and glum, nobody would want to be a part of us and stuff. So I know that talking with one of the members of our group right here today, there was some fun stuff that was going on in their neighborhood, and with that, you've got to find yourself going, wow, there really is a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot of life to be lived. And it's something that you have to remind alcoholics from time to time that this is a life worth living, and it's worth living without alcohol, and look at all of the great things that are happening because of it, whether that's now being able to hold down a steady job, the reintroduction and inclusion of family and friends, and your health, obviously improving over a given period of time as well, which are all very, very positive things to make sure that you remind the newcomer or the recovering alcoholic. And it's, have you a sufficient substitute? Well, of course we do. And just those three areas alone, work, family, friends, and health, are all areas where you can actually find some improvements and some happiness going forward. Rob? I'm sorry, Bill. I'm sorry. I'm saying Rob. I mean Bill.
Okay, I know what you mean. That's fine. All right, the book asked the question, have you a sufficient substitute? Now it's going to answer it. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you.
Yep. And those are a list of promises there, basically telling you that all of the things that we've talked about, all of the things that we contribute to this fellowship, especially, we're in this group here. We're all friends, and consider this kind of an extended family by and large. So of course you're gonna be able to answer that question fairly deftly with regard to what is out there and what is the positives that you've got to look forward to. And that release from care, boredom, and worry, we can talk about anything in these groups and not worry at all about not being understood or not having somebody that has had somewhat of a similar experience as well. So and certainly the things that come out of these groups at times are very fun and or very funny. And those satisfactory years ahead of you, absolutely. Whether that's work, a positive retirement, it is friends, family. And just knowing that you're not going to miss out on parts of life because you're, either passed out or asleep from a debacle. So all good stuff. Bill?
Yeah, on the first paragraph, it told us that drinking gave us release from care, boredom, and worry. Now this paragraph told us that Alcoholics Anonymous can give us release from care, boredom, and worry. Same words are used. In other words, AA can be a substitute for our drinking. All right, the next paragraph, I'll read two because one's only like one line or line and a half.
Yep.
How is it to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give up yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself.
Absolutely. And really, here is another one of those places where a question is asked and immediately they answer the question. And how is that to come about? And where am I to find these people? And it directly tells you right off the bat, you're going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people on a sinking ship. The beauty of where we are today, and it's not lost on any of us, is that we are an international group. And the fact is we are finding the same fellowship and the same lifelong friends through Zoom and virtually, which I can tell you, in my opinion, is a richer and much more desirable place to be, notwithstanding that in some cases, not all, that face-to-face, human contact is certainly a great thing to have. But I will say this, fortunately, because of the pandemic and going out and trying to find a viable substitute, and this is important for sponsors and sponsees as well, and that is we were able to find this group. We came together and we now meet on a weekly basis, which I can tell you I meet with you all more than I meet with most of my family. So I would just tell you, this is a really nice place to be. And I'm so fortunate and happy that we are together. So you're gonna find it. You just have to, and it's not hard. You just easily pick up a finger and you're gonna find it. You're gonna look for it and it's gonna be there. And there again, it's the high and low, rich and poor. We're all coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and yet we're all equals in this room, and that's a good thing as well. And we all feel responsible. I know this because I've got a couple of folks that if they're going to miss the meeting, they'll actually email me and apologize and tell me why they're going to miss it, and it's all good. But I'm super appreciative and amazed that there's that connection is so strong that they'll even let me know if they're not going to make it to the meeting. I highlighted a few things here. One is that we're shoulder to shoulder on a common journey, and that certainly is true for all of us. And I know now what it means to give of myself to others that may survive and rediscover life. And the same thing holds true as there are people in this room that do the same thing for me. And last but certainly not least, and that is this: love thy neighbor as thyself. What better thing to say right now with regard to this? Bill?
Okay, like Leo mentioned, shoulder to shoulder, and he said that means we're equal. We don't lead one behind the other. We don't have like a general alcoholic and a whole bunch of privates. We're all equal, we're all the same thing. And when it says we will give of ourselves, that means I'm the problem, you're the solution. All right, the next paragraph. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that.
Yeah, and then we'll emphasize our own recovery proves this. And yes, there are people out there, one, that don't understand alcoholism and don't see why or how we can't control it. We've talked about that. On top of that, when you've got somebody in the folds of a family or friends or whatever, and you know that they're clearly an alcoholic and they're at their particular low, it doesn't seem at all possible for them to ever recover. Yet when they do, they become, as we've already read and we've already experienced in our own lives, they can become some of the happiest, most appreciative and productive people out there, which just blows people away. And yet, and people are drawn to that. So that in part is why, even after a few years, family members will start to reach out and reconnect to this person. Friends certainly as well, the right kind of friends, and I'll qualify that. Certainly, we don't want the type of friend that doesn't care and wants to just have another partner in drinking. Obviously, that's not the idea. But they can, an individual alcoholic that does recover certainly rises out of misery and bad repute and hopelessness. All of a sudden, it becomes hopeful, and reputation, while tarnished, can be polished up a little bit and actually come back in such a way. And really, kind of this, I've written a little saying out here on the side that I apply to this particular paragraph, and that is the practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. And the idea is you've got to get on the bus. You got to get on the bus with us and journey down the road of recovery with us, and you're going to find all of the benefits and the happiness that we've been talking about and will continue to talk about.
Amen.
Bill?
Yeah, there's hope in that line that you just read. they can happen with you. That gives a newcomer hope. All right, the next paragraph. Our hope is that when this chip of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it to follow its suggestions. Many, we are sure, will rise to their feet and march on. They will approach still other sick ones, and fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous may spring up in each city and hamlet, havens for those who must find a way out.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? I think there are still corners of the world that can and will improve with Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is still absolutely true that every day of the week, month, or year, there is at least a few people that have started the journey of recovery and in fact are going to recover from alcoholism, and that is just like, it's just like fishing. A bad day at Alcoholics Anonymous, which is only a few people recovering as opposed to many people recovering, is still better than, a day without Alcoholics Anonymous. So I would just say that that's kind of what we're trying to say here, and that is that the alcoholism is always going to be there, unfortunately, but we've got a strong running of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a lot of us that understand the program as a differentiator from the fellowship. Both are ingredients that are necessary to recovery, but making sure that you are working the program alongside doing the fellowship is important. And we are sure many will rise to their feet and march on. It's just inevitable because there's so many great people in Alcoholics Anonymous that are so willing to reach out and help another, and that's really all it needs. That planted seed is the catalyst to recovery. When it's saying may spring up in each city and hamlet, certainly I'm sure there's places that still haven't experienced AA, but at the same time, I would tell you that there are cities and towns now with multiple meetings, multiple groups, and certainly something out there, especially with Zoom and the virtual rooms that we've got these days, to find a good fit, both in personality and character, as well as program that will help people rise up from alcoholism and recover. Bill?
Okay, the next paragraph. In the chapter, Working with Others, you gathered an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You will want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here is a brief account.
Bill, we'll go ahead and get that next paragraph in, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, years ago, in 1935, one of our number made a journey to a certain western city. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. Had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feelings and controversy.
All right, so always a storyteller, and certainly this is the one where Bill W. goes to Akron, Ohio. The company in question is the National Rubber Machine Company, and obviously it was that business failure that prompted Bill to try and avoid the bar at the hotel, and that is when he found and reached out to Bob. Dr. Bob. And so that is what we're talking about right here. And we are talking about working with others and how we approach and aid others to health, because obviously it was Bob was at a really low point at that point, and Bill was concerned about his own sobriety and recovery. And that is when he reached out to Bob, and when Bob finally got the idea and the ability to reach down very deep and be able to get that inner strength. and recover from alcohol through a spiritual experience. So that's what we're talking about at this point. But this is obviously, we've seen and heard this. We know what the results were. There's nothing unrealistic about any of it. I know that we still have people we don't even know yet that we're going to approach that are going to, in fact, recover. And I'm talking specifically about this group itself. And even in the worst of times, a business coming off badly, lawsuits having to occur, a loss of income, a loss of livelihood, and that type of thing certainly feels like you've lost everything. But there is hope. There is hope. Bill?
Okay, next paragraph. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone, but whom?
Yeah, and we're just continuing on with the story. We all kind of know how this ends, but but this is a great review. The idea here too is that we just talked about being in that despair, that kind of low point, that all is lost because I've lost this business opportunity. Where am I going to get my next paycheck? Where is the money going to be coming from in order for me to survive? It obviously creates a situation where a lot of people would find themselves searching out a drink. And so in this case, the concern was that they were going to violate their sobriety, certainly Bill W., and still feeling physically weak and not sure of not having his footing that he did find over time is one that starts to search out another person. I might also make a note here that allegedly at this point, Bill W. only has about $10 in his pocket, which is quite a bit of money back then, but still nonetheless, it's only $10 that he had in his pocket. Bill?
Okay, next paragraph. One dismal afternoon, he pushed the hotel lobby, wondering how his bill was to be paid. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby, a door opened to an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend.
Yeah. So there's that alcoholism is talking to him. He's kind of got the devil on one shoulder, probably the angel on the other, but here it is whispering in his ear. All you got to do is walk through that passageway into the bar. There are plenty of people in there that would love to get to know you, say hello, that type of thing. A couple of 4 drinks, and there you are off to the races, and all would be well. Except for one thing, he knew that was not his ending. His ending would find himself completely blacked out, no money, owing a lot more than what he, was able to pay, and it was not going to go well. The good news is he did have a few months of sobriety under his belt. He also had the memory, because remember, we don't remember. He could remember that, in fact, this was not the path that he should be taking, even though it was a desirable one, and he was fighting it mightily at this point. Bill?
Okay, the next paragraph. Of course, he couldn't drink, but why not sit, hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now? Perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Yeah. Again, it was the old insidious insanity, that first drink. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar.
What strength? The ability to actually have that going in your mind, trying to convince yourself. The obsession is gripping him with regard to drinking, and he is definitely on thin ice. And I'll tell you, even with 6 months of sobriety, what a feat to be able to build up that strength and courage to turn away from what was in fact not going to turn out well, but be damned. All of us have been there where we knew it wasn't going to turn out well, yet we gave ourselves over to alcohol and his ability to walk down that hallway towards the church directory. Also, Bill at that point recognized the lie, the lie that he could control his drinking. We talk about, what it was on, he could handle it, say 3 drinks, no more. I'm going to cut things off. There's no way he was going to be able to cut things off. Just no way. Bill?
Yeah, this is a really good part of the book. I like this part here because it's got a lot of the history in it. Bill's deal fell apart, and he was, pacing the hotel lobby, and he didn't know how he was going to pay his bill or whatever. He was thinking about going in the bar. He had maybe 6 months of sobriety, and he thought he could have 3 drinks. Does anybody identify with that? I got 6 months now. Maybe I can handle 2 or 3.
Absolutely.
That just seems to be the way most alcoholics think. Oh, hey, I got 6 months. I'm good. I can do this. Yeah. And he turned around, like you said, the devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other. That's the bar on one side of the room and the church directory. And he walked back to the church directory. That's symbolic of divine intervention. It doesn't say he walked to the telephone. It specifically says he walked to the church directory. So his higher power took over. That's basically what I think was going on here. All right, the next paragraph. But what about his responsibilities, his family, and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well? Ah, yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many such in this town. He would phone a clergyman. His sanity returned, and he thanked God. Selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into the booth and lifted the receiver.
Yeah. And look at this. He's thinking about others. He's talking first about his family and friends, but then it's interesting that he also brings up the unreached alcoholic at the time, the ones that are still out there that haven't experienced the strength and hope that we've got and the ability to recover. And he obviously makes the assumption, which is a real one, that there's a lot of them in the town. I think it's also interesting that, his sanity has returned. He got rid of the idea as far as of drinking, and he turned to his higher power, and he actually selected. And it's also interesting that he does it at random, and here he finds Dr. Bob, so and he actually goes ahead and acts on his impulse when he does go to the directory. And the person that he ends up calling is a Reverend Walter Tunks, I guess, if I pronounce that right. Bill, you can help me. Suggests going for a walk and meeting up with this doctor. Bill? This is like a really good part of the book. Again, I mean, what Bill's doing, he's showing us how if you use step 12, you can stay sober. In other words, you start thinking about others, how you can help somebody else, and your desire to drink will go away from you. That's the point I believe Bill's trying to get across to us here. He's showing us if we think of others, our sanity returns. His name was Reverend Tunks, Tunks. All right, the next paragraph. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town, who, though formerly able and respected, was nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. It was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damage. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic. All right. And we're talking about a couple of folks here. If I'm understanding things, and Bill, you can help me with this, I think that the clergyman actually led Bill to Henrietta Sieberling, who then led him to Dr. Robert Smith, otherwise known as Dr. Bob. And so I think that's the kind of the progression of this historically what actually happened. And it was in fact a description of Dr. Bob, you know, the nadir of his alcoholic despair, meaning he's at the low point. He was having trouble even making it to his practice. He was losing his reputation, and he was able to not able to pay his bills, and things were getting really, really bad at that point. A lot of things going on in his life. Looking around, there was a lot of despair. So I'll give it over to Bill.
Yeah, a lot of what went on here. Bill went to the church directory. He found the name Reverend Tunks. He called him up, and Reverend Tunks didn't know any alcoholics because Bill wanted to talk to an alcoholic. So the Reverend Tunks was he was one of the people that was running the Oxford group in Akron, and Bill told him he was in the Oxford group, so they kind of got along right away. And he gave him 10 phone numbers, and Bill called all 10 numbers, and nobody knew an alcoholic. But one of the numbers that he called, a guy named Norman Shepard, told Bill that he knew a lady that was in the Oxford group that had been praying for months and months to try to help one of her friends get sober. So he gave her that number. That was Henrietta Sieberling or Seiberling. I'm not sure how to say the name. And Bill was afraid to call the number because he knew the name from Wall Street. Frank Seiberling is the guy who started the Goodyear Company. He would be considered today like a billionaire. And Bill was kind of reluctant to call him, but he was desperate, so he called the number anyway. And it turned out that she was his daughter-in-law, and she was estranged from her husband. She was living in the gatehouse, and her husband was living in the mansion with his mother and father. But that's how he, and Henrietta knew this guy, Dr. Bob, that couldn't stop drinking. And she was praying for months and months for somebody to come by and help him. And she believed that when Bill called her up, that was the answer to her prayers. Is that divine intervention or what? Okay, the next paragraph. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. The spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. He told her he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business, only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? He would do anything he said but that.
All right. So there's a couple of things here. And one is that here is one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. So we've got that as something that's part of this. And Bill talked about mainly his own drinking and not so much Bob's drinking, so that he could, in fact, win over this alcoholic with the experience and the knowledge that others would not have had. And they talked allegedly for over 6 hours. So this was a long conversation. I can only imagine that if Bill was talking about his alcoholism mainly, that somehow in there was intertwined some of Bob's own comparisons, like, well, I had that, or of course I understand that, and see, you get me on this. And you know, he had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Most certainly nobody knows that he's a drunk because they've been trying to hide it. I would say that a lot of people probably understood it, probably knew it, but probably wasn't saying anything about it. It's kind of that awkward position that a lot of people are in, and when they understand things as far as that goes. So so this is what saved Bill that day, but ultimately that's what also saved Dr. Bob. This particular meeting and this long conversation that they had that night, and again, just like Bill just said, what a divine intervention. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I'm gonna let Bill finish things up a little bit here, and then we'll close out with the Serenity Prayer. Bill?
Okay, again, basically what Bill's doing, he's giving us instructions here on how to stay sober. And this is real interesting. There's a lot of history here. This is real interesting how these two people got together. You know, when Dr. Bob was in the Oxford group, and he would have been in the Oxford group for something like 2 years trying to get sober. And when Bill called up the Reverend Tunks, he was one of the guys running the Oxford group out in Akron. He didn't know any alcoholics. So he gave Bill 10 phone numbers of Oxford group people, and all of them didn't know any alcoholics. But one guy knew somebody who was praying for an alcoholic. So there was almost no alcoholics in the Oxford group at this time. And Dr. Bob was there, and he didn't identify with anybody because these people were like talking about not sinning anymore and being saved and going to heaven. And Bob couldn't identify with that. And when Bill came and talked to Bob, like Leo said, Bill talked about Bill's drinking. He didn't talk about Bob's drinking, and Bob was able to identify with him. That's why that worked. When one alcoholic talks to another, and we can identify with the other person, and they can identify for us, there's a certain bond there that nobody else has. If you didn't drink the same way that I drank, how on earth can you possibly tell me what I need to do so I can stop drinking? I need to deal with somebody that went through the same thing that I'm going through. And that's what happened with Dr. Bob, and that's why it worked for him. And one of the things that they said to each other when they first met, Dr. Bob said, "Why did you come here to try to keep me from drinking?" And Bill said, "I didn't come here to keep you from drinking. I came here to keep me from drinking." That's why we do the 12th step, because it keeps us better. And if the other person gets better, that's a bonus. And Bill also said to him when he first looked at Dr. Bob, he said, "You know, pal, you look like you need a drink." And that kind of broke the ice, and they were able to start talking with each other. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share, and thanks for letting me read today.
Yeah, Bill, I'm going to ask you one more favor, and that is if you want to lead us in the Serenity Prayer. And then I also want to thank you for reading today on behalf of the group. It's always great to hear from you, but it was especially a treat today to hear you read.
Okay, thank you very much. It was an honor for me to do it. All right, we'll close with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Amen.